What is going on, Panthers Nation? Carolina Dad here, your host of the Two Growls, One Roar podcast. Hope you folks are doing okay today, doing well whenever you're watching this show. It's draft season. Draft season is in full force, but we're not going to talk about the draft today. I do have an upcoming episode where we're going to start looking at those prospect visits, the top 30 visits, who should the Panthers be targeting. It's not going to be a mock draft or anything of that nature, but more of a, hey, let's get prepared for the draft. Got a few weeks out. Let's see who do we think the Panthers are going to take. So I'll have that coming up, and I guess I say a few weeks. Really, it's 15, technically 16 days for the Panthers, so I guess a little over 2 weeks before we actually start that. But I was sitting down the other day, as usual, thinking about Panthers content. I've got to start, got this little notebook, well, not a little notebook, got a notebook on my phone, notepad, where I just keep track of like this idea, and maybe I should think about this. Hoping to do a lot more planning in the future and really start flushing this thing out. But I thought about this season, this upcoming season for the Carolina Panthers, and what are our expectations? And there's a lot of ways to look at this. I think you can look at last year, you can look at the turnover, you look at everything on paper, and you may say, well, this year is going to be a wash, or I don't have high expectations. But one of the things that I thought about like coming into this, and this isn't really like my expectations, but this feels like, I don't know the right word, the cleanest offseason that the Panthers have had in years, in probably 6 years. In the entire time that Tepper has owned this organization, this has to be the cleanest offseason. And you go back and you look, and I start here. We know Ron Rivera was here. Ron Rivera got fired mid-season. Perry Fuel took over. That was in 2019. So right out of that, 2019, the turmoil starts. I think it was kind of settled for 18, but then there's that pressure of like, oh, he's on the hot seat, right? Ron Rivera's on the hot seat, so you lead into that. Ron Rivera gets fired. Later in the season, 12 games in, Perry comes in. And at that point, you're like, okay, it's going to be a new coaching search. We're going to restart this whole thing. And that's when we go into the Matt Rule hire. No need to reminisce on that. Hope folks have seen the clip of him talking about Bill Belichick as this mentor that came into Nebraska football and talked all about football with Matt Rule. And he essentially says that he feels like it's a shame that Bill Belichick is not an NFL head coach, which I kind of agree with. I know I had some flack on my end that's like, I don't really want him here, but he's a great, smart guy, right? Kind of funny that you had Matt Rule, who was an NFL coach, saying this about Bill Belichick. But you look at the first year with Bill Belichick. Oh my God, the first year with Matt Rule. See, Aaron Blennon, is it? The first year with Matt Rule, I don't think there was a lot of expectations, right? The Panthers go 5-11. You've got the trendy hire with Joe Brady, Phil Snow, defensive coordinator. Moving, and you're trying to, figure out like situation at quarterback, what that's going to look like. Go into 2021, and you're like, okay, we're going to make a step forward. Things, expectations are kind of there, but not really. We got to improve. We had 5 wins. Things don't get better. You fire Joe Brady mid-season. Jeff Nixon takes over. So then you're going into another offseason, figuring out quarterbacks. Remember, we're talking about going from Teddy Bridgewater, trading for Darnold, then trading for Baker Mayfield, and you got quarterback competition, PJ Walker, all these things every single offseason leading into the actual season. You hire Ben McAdoo as your offensive coordinator, just doesn't work out. And at that point, trading away players, everything that comes along with that, you have another cycle where a coach is fired midway through. Again, Matt Rule fired 5 games in. Steve Wilks takes over. We know about the success of Steve Wilks. Not here to talk about that today. People know I'm a fan of him. But he goes 6-6, coaches the final 12 games, and it's another offseason where we're like, who's going to be the coach? Who's going to be this? Are we going to figure out our quarterback? Panthers, as we know, go hire Frank Reich. Frank Reich's your guy. Hire Thomas Brown, Jerry Rivero. You're like, oh, this team's built for success. You get the number 1 overall pick. You get Bryce Young. Tons of expectations for this team. We don't need to relive that. We know how it played out. Chris Tabor takes over. That was a wash. I don't think anyone expected him to do what Steve did. It's a wash. Season's done. Let's move on. Here we are. Again, another season, another round of hiring as a coach. There is some stability on the defensive side of the ball. Yes, we've lost some key players. Burns, Luvu, Chin, Etor, and I know Chin didn't play a lot, but just I know that's a name, big name. You lose those things, but you still have stability with that entire staff in place. You bring in Dave Canales with kind of lower expectations compared to some of the big names. Like if Ben Johnson was hired here, there's no doubt in my mind that people would expect him to win day one. Come out, win day one, and then we'd be back on the same path. Like maybe he could pull it off, but likely you're sitting there again, 2, 3, 4 wins, 5. People getting upset. Oh my gosh, this was the wrong hire. Why did we do this? Where we are today is I feel like there's this, just like I said, calm, clean slate for this team. We're not wondering who the quarterback is. So we've got our quarterback solved. We've made improvements on offense. Defense is stable. And coming into this now, it's like, okay, it's not all the question marks that we anticipated. Now, I know some will say, well, there's question marks if Bryce is going to step up. There's question marks on how's the offense going to look. What is Dave going to be able to do with this offense? How are we going to improve our pass protection? How is run blocking going to look? What about receivers and separation? Yes, those things are still questioned, but it's not as big of a question as it has been in years past. And there's a lot lower expectations. And all these things kind of can turn into good. There's no doubt in my mind that this can be a winning football team. Like, I think as fans, we want to say, well, we're stuck in the pit of doom and it's never going to get better and the team's never going to win again. Whether you want to chalk that up to ownership, to the football, the play on the field, it doesn't matter. But I think we are in this spot where it's like, okay, you know what? This next year, I could see some good things happening for this team. I could see us winning more than the over, the 4.5, 5, and even above that win total. I know I've talked about the win total a little bit, but it's nice to be in this position, at least for 1 year, even though there was a change at the head coaching job. But it's like the hire that we had, we kind of come in here and it's like, okay, let's sort this thing out. You like the energy that you have seen from Canales, and I know there's only clips and videos from starting, the off-season program, all that stuff. But it feels like we're heading in the right direction. Clean slate, right? And the other thing I like to think about, this is just, again, between podcast creator, content creator, and fan of the team. There's going to be a ton of media that's already out there, a ton of our Panthers, content creators. They're going to be like, this team's bad. They're not going to be good. All those things. I think you can believe in whatever you want to believe in, but I do think speaking those things out, hey, whether or not you're going to have these players liking your stuff or commenting, they are tuned in. They're tuned in on X. They're tuned in on Instagram, social, TikTok. They're there. They may not follow you or follow me or follow this, but I've seen players like Amir Smith-Marset interact with some of my content. I've seen other players interact. So whether they're talking about it, they're seeing it. And so when you have a lot of people sitting back saying, oh, this is going to be a terrible team, like that's what they're going to hear. And now I know they could flip it and use it as motivation. But at the same time, it's like, hey, why not speak positive things about what this team can be and start talking about how this team can win? Hey, let's spread some positivity. Because if you think about it, it's just like any of us, all of us are humans. And if you sit back and watch and listen to a bunch of people telling you, oh, you're going to be terrible, you are a bad team, you're no good, you start to believe it, whether you want to or not. And people can say, oh, well, I just block it out. It's hard, man. It's in this day and age, whatever you do, it's hard to block some of this stuff out. It's hard to just sit back and say, yeah, I can easily block this out on my mind and I'm not going to worry about it. But it's there, it's present. And so, like, why not start saying, hey, you know what? This team's going to win some football games. They're going to be competitive. We're going to see improvements. And we got a clean slate, right? And I think this is year one of something bigger that is to come. And I'm getting at the front of the train, leading the way for fans. And I think we run into this, or I run into this as a creator, where if I tell you, hey, don't be surprised that the team's going to be good. If they are good, people say, oh, that's amazing. If they're bad, they're going to say, oh, you said they were going to be good. Or you throw out a record prediction. That's part of the reason that I've contemplated, do I even want to give out a record prediction? Do I even want to predict every single game? Because it's like a double-edged sword. No matter where I sit in the realm, people are going to judge you based off of it. And I know there's a lot of good to it, but I think you can say some things, it's just like working for the team. Not that I'm working for it, but, you don't have Jake Delhomme and Jordan Growls going on their podcast every week saying, the Panthers are going to lose this game. Or turn on the radio broadcast and listen to Luke Kuechly say, oh, yeah, the Panthers, they're not going to put up a fight. This game's over. You have people that believe and talk through, and I get it. From afar, you can say, man, it's not looking great. Like if you go back and look at last year. But I am excited about what we have and what's being built here. Although a lot of folks outside may say, I don't really see anything positive happening. I think we're going to see a trend in the right direction. Love the clean slate. Anyways, folks, I'm going to have more content coming per usual. Appreciate y'all for tuning in. This is Carolina Dad. Y'all have a good one. I know I just closed out the episode, but I had something else top of mind as I was sitting here writing out a tweet. The other thing that you don't have heading into this offseason or this program is anything related to contracts. You think about Brian Burns year in and year out, the trade speculations or players being traded away. The DJ Moore are reminiscing on Christian McCaffrey getting traded away. You don't have that. Now that Derek Brown's contract is in place, there's no questions, right? I guess you could say there's kind of a question around J.C. Horn and his contract. But overall, I feel really great about the state of this team.